You're listening to the DFO Rundown podcast with Frank Seravalli and Jason Gregor on dailyfaceoff.com.
Welcome to episode 18 of the DFO Rundown. I'm Jason Gregor, Frank Seravalli, and hey, we didn't even know, but I guess it's a Black Hoodie show today. Frank, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Last show before the deadline. I got my PWHPA sweatshirt on. Wanted to show my support for women's hockey, and I actually bought this. This was not a freebie. Bought this after watching the Dream Gap tour at Madison Square Garden. And what's funny? And it's an awesome thing for women's hockey because I bought it, and then I got a note saying, like, we were overwhelmed with the demand. It's going to take us a few weeks to get it to you. And I was like, that's great. That's a good sign. So glad to wear it.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I've got this is J. Percy Page. It's a high school in Edmonton, and I run a foundation called Gregor's Grads, where we supply suits and shirts and shoes and ties for high school grads who can't afford it.
That's awesome.
And this is our 7th year doing it, and they just sent me this as a thank you for helping out the grads over the years. And I'll be honest, this is like one of my new favorite hoodies. I just got it and I've been wearing it. I love it. It's comfortable and it's not too big. I hate big baggy stuff. This thing fits perfect.
Well, when you fluctuate weight like I do, you kind of need them a little bit more generous at times.
Okay, no, that's fair. Yeah, I like it. I found if I keep it tight, then that forces me to stay tight. So that's.
I wish I had that in my arsenal.
No, that's my mindset on that. Well, hey, speaking of tight, here we are. It's getting closer and closer to trade deadline. I don't even know what the math is here. Closing in on 72 hours, I guess, by Friday afternoon. So you look at a few teams. We've already seen 2 trades. The Islanders make the move that we had talked about on Monday's show, Frank, with Paul Mary, and they get it Zajac. We didn't see that coming, but they add him in. The Florida Panthers basically kind of salary dump and give up some prospects to add more cap space. So my question is, Frank, Florida's got all the cap space. Do they have the picks and the prospects to use that cap, like to make it enticing for teams to want to give them players?
Well, they're going to try. And I thought Bill Zito was really creative with the trade that he made in moving the Connolly contract. He had been after that for the last few days, trying to free up some cap space and also some real dollar space too. Like that's $7 million in real money that's being moved to Chicago, which is a big deal. And I think they're certainly trying. They're a team to watch until Monday. There's no doubt about that. They're looking for a defenseman, but I think they're also potentially looking in the top 6. They think they're a team that can go toe-to-toe with the teams in their division, Tampa, Carolina. And so they want to be right there in that mix. And, I think the hot rumor that was circulating on Friday after Zito was able to clear that cap space was, can they go after the 2 guys in Columbus that are big on our TSN trade bait board? And that would be David Savard at number 1 and also Nick Foligno at number 4. There's no question those players would make the Florida Panthers a better team. I just don't know that they have the picks that they want to spend and the prospects in their arsenal to really make it work. I mean, it's one thing to trade a Borgstrom, for instance, who is lacking confidence, plays out his entry-level contract and goes back to Europe, and you need to, rejuvenate his career. Stan Bowman believes he can do it, and that's great. So you're willing to pay that price in order to move a contract like Connolly. But man, it would have to be a haul to get the number 1 player on our board and the top defenseman available in David Savard, but also the leadership and everything else that comes with Nick Foligno in one package. And I think that's probably a lazy narrative. And I wouldn't be surprised to think, because of the Zito connection, having worked in Columbus under Jarmo Kekalainen, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him get one of those players. And I think the target is Savard.
Yeah, and that makes sense, especially with the injury to Ekblad. I watched the third period of the Carolina-Florida game last night, and man, there's not a lot separating those 2 teams. But I'll say, like, we talked about Florida, but man, I really like Carolina's team. And we had Don Waddell on the rundown a few weeks ago, and he made it very clear, Frank, and he's been quiet. Haven't heard a lot, but I can't sleep on Carolina. Like, I think they're even closer than Florida to be pushing Tampa Bay. And I won't be surprised here at all if Don Waddell is a pretty big player in the next few days.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I mean, look, he said it on the rundown. You mentioned right shot defenseman, hockey deal preferably. They're looking for someone with term and a depth forward. And so I think they've been scouring the league. I think they talked to the Anaheim Ducks about Josh Manson. I think they talked to the Los Angeles Kings about Sean Walker. I don't think either one of those two are going to materialize, but I think those are interesting targets, and it gives you an idea into kind of what they're thinking, right? Along the lines of that type of real impact player. And so, then up front, I can't really quite figure out who fits the bill there. I thought there might have been some interest in a guy like Mike Hoffman once he popped up, but I think that that's probably they were a team that had interest in Hoffman in the offseason, and I think that's probably a no-go at this point.
Well, you're speaking of Mike Hoffman, you look at him, and like when he signed in St. Louis, I know everybody's like, oh, he'll fill in for Tarasenko. That'll be great. But like St. Louis has a very specific style that they play. Regardless of what your skill set is as a player, there's a certain style they play. I just don't think it fits Mike Hoffman at all, to be honest. And trust me, like I know that Mike Hoffman's a shooter. Mike Hoffman's more of an offensive guy. He's not a rugged player. He's not going to get on the forecheck and, be the first forward in on the forecheck very often and be aggressive. That's just not who he is. Like you can ask him to do it and maybe he can try. I just don't think he's successful. And it's kind of unique because I think the Blues, Binnington said, hey, we're coming after his 50 save victory the other night. And like, I look at Mike Hoffman as a pure rental for a team that says, hey, if we're looking for a shooter, if you know exactly what you want, there's not many better pure shooters who are going to be available here in the next 72 hours.
No, there aren't, but you have to have the right set of expectations because it's like, if you're bringing in Hoffman to try and do any of those other things, you're going to be really disappointed. And that's the one thing that people, kind of knock against Mike Hoffman and his game is like, he's a one-trick pony. He's an elite shooter, but what he does is something that so few other guys can do, that it's a really valuable set of skills, provided that you have the rest of the pieces in your group that can surround him in a way that makes sense for your team. And so, I kind of wondered about a guy like Mike Hoffman for the Toronto Maple Leafs, for instance, but they're the exact wrong team. Like, they're looking for that position player, but he's not the stylistic fit that they're looking for. And what else is interesting, Jay, about Mike Hoffman's season is that he's such a pure shooter, and it's usually on the power play. And he's got one power play goal this year. 8 of his 9 goals are at even strength.
Well, you know what? So that's kind of a positive. And I think his goal numbers are down just because he's not scoring where he usually does. And to me, Mike Hoffman, like we talk about all the great shooters, like Alex Ovechkin's arguably the greatest goal scorer of all time. He's also been playing with one of the best passers, right? Like you look at Patrick Laine's into Columbus right now, and Patrick Laine looks lost. They don't have a real passer that's going to accentuate a player. Like look at Brett Hull's numbers when he played with Adam Oates. Brett Hull was still a good scorer away from Oates, but he wasn't clear. He wasn't the same. Right? Like if you can find like an elite, I look at the Edmonton Oilers who desperately need a top 6 left winger. Dominic Cahoon is not a top 6 left winger in my books. No way he is. And, I know Ken Holland, they don't have a ton of cap space, but man, I wonder if they can find a way to work. And I know that Mike Hoffman might have some glaring errors, but I love what you said, Frank. He does something that no one else does. Like, so he's a one-trick pony, but last I checked, that's a pretty important trick to have.
Yeah. And like, that's kind of what drives me a little crazy hearing Craig Berube talk about him and criticize him. Well, he doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. Well, like you're thinking about it in the wrong way. Stop thinking about all the things that he doesn't do and think about the one thing that he does do that no one else on your team can do. And so I think teams get wrapped up his compete level. He doesn't play defense. He's not going to win puck. Stop. Just stop. He's a shooter. He's a pure shooter. Like that's it. So temper your own expectations. And that's a conversation that a GM needs to have with a coach when he's signing or bringing in a player is like, let's figure out what this guy is. And I think there's certain teams that do a really good job setting those expectations. And it also helps set the expectation in the marketplace as well with your fan base.
Oh, without question. And so, you look at those teams. What about the Colorado Avalanche? We've talked so much. We all know they need a goaltender. Like pretty obvious, and not a starting goaltender, but they need a backup goaltender.
They need Jonathan Bernier is who they need.
Yeah, that's fair. He wasn't great last night against Nashville, but he's been really good for the most part. Do you think though, I look at Colorado and man, like I watched them here, I've watched a lot of their games the last few weeks. Man, their big guys are really going right now. And I just,
that team's been a wagon.
Yeah. And like, I wonder how good they'd be if they had Johnson, because my only concern,
Eric Johnson?
Yeah, Eric Johnson. He's only played 4 games. He's
Yep.
probably not going to play from what I've been told. So you look at them, my only slight concern is, are they big enough top to
In the
bottom on
playoffs.
their back end? They
Right.
need, I think, just like a look at Zach Bogosian is not a difference maker in Tampa Bay, but he filled a hole very well on a good team. And Colorado doesn't need the difference makers. They've got Makar, and they've got, Girard if you want offense. They've got obviously McKinnon and Kadri and Rantanen and go down the list. I just think they need like that.
They need a Joel Edmondson, Robert Bortuzzo.
Like David Savard.
Well, he's probably a little elite in terms of exactly what they're looking for. Is he not? Like how much ice time would he be getting?
Well, I
would
think
he justify the guys that he would be jumping over? Is he jumping over to get, the minutes that would justify the acquisition cost?
Yeah. And that's a fair question. I just look and say, man, if like you just look at the size of the defense cores that have won Stanley Cups the last few seasons, like Tampa Bay was ginormous and St. Louis was massive, except for Vince Dunn. He was the only guy who was small, and that's
who could, by the way, be on the move. He's on our trade bait board.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I'm just thinking stylistic fit, like someone that maybe has a little bite, like, would a Dmitry Kulikov make any sense there? I'm trying to think of some of the other guys that would be available that could fit that bill.
Yeah. And sometimes, like you look at Washington, remember when they acquired Kempny? I don't think any of us thought that Kempny was going to go in there and play as big of a role as he did. And
one of the best trade deadline acquisitions of the last 20 years.
Oh, that one. And the other one was very good that no one talks about is Michael Handzus in 2013. He went in and played a second line center role in Chicago and had like 11 points in the playoffs.
I got your guy, Jamie Alexiak. That's your guy.
Perfect. He'd be perfect. Huge. Like, I think Jamie Alexiak, teams, Alexiak, you talked earlier about Mike Hoffman and what his strengths are. Jamie Alexiak is a mountain of a man. He's good defensively. He's a decent skater. And in the playoffs, like
a mountain of a man. I see what you did there with the Avalanche.
Yeah. He covers so much ground. Like I just think Joe Sakic, there's only Colorado's window's open for a few years. Don't get me wrong. But they're healthy right now outside of Eric Johnson. I think they have to add a defenseman on top of the goalie.
So I was also looking at the list. Nikita Zadorov, they had him in Colorado, and he's in Chicago now. He's another guy that's on our board that could be on the move. I think Chicago is they're a fascinating team because they're willing to do just about anything at the deadline. They're willing to eat money. You saw the Connolly trade. They've got cap space. It's use or lose. And I think they're also willing to tinker with some of the guys on their roster. There's a couple veteran pieces that you could pluck off. A Janmark, for instance. There's also some, relatively younger guys, a little less experienced. What about a David Kampf? There's a bunch of different guys that I think the Chicago Blackhawks would be willing to talk about if the price was right.
Well, David Kampf still in the running, Frank, chasing the Tobias Reeder record. I don't think he'll get there this year because they don't play enough games, but still looking for a Gino. I look at other teams like the Winnipeg Jets, the Toronto Maple Leafs. You look in the North Division, Toronto would be the favorite, but I don't think they're like a gargantuan favorite where the other teams think, hey, you know what? We make a move here to. I'm really curious because Cheveldayoff, they're kind of Jekyll and Hyde. Some years they don't do anything, and then other years they make a spot. What's your read on Winnipeg? Because in my conversations, I'm like, well, they want a defenseman, but how I don't sense that they're desperate enough to overpay right now, where sometimes a team will overpay.
I mean, I don't know about overpay. They are. I would be shocked, head sewn to the carpet Tuesday morning, shocked if the Winnipeg Jets don't make a move of some kind of significance on their blue line, because it may just be that the price is too high for Savard or for one of the big names, but I think they recognize their need, and I think they have the assets and ability to do it. And I think they're just waiting at this point for the prices to come down. I think they've considered a lot of different options. We reported this week on Insider Trading that they had asked about Josh Manson in Anaheim. I believe Winnipeg is on Josh Manson's no trade list at the moment, which, as I think Gregor mentioned, on the rundown, that unfortunately just happens a lot for Winnipeg. But I would be very, very surprised if they don't do something. And I don't say that at all about the Maple Leafs. At this point, the way things are trending, I would be surprised if the Maple Leafs did something big.
Yeah, I agree with you on big. I still think they want a top 9 forward, though.
Every team wants a top 9 forward. Like who doesn't?
Yeah.
I mean, let's go through our list. We want a top 9 forward. We want him to be productive. We want him to fit well with our team. We want his cap hit to be low. And what's next? What more do you want from him?
Yeah, but the only reason I say that is, you look, Mikheyev had to play in place of Nylander.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder sometimes a team all of a sudden is like, yeah, okay, you know what? If you're 100% healthy, but we all know it's rare for teams, not to get banged up for even a few games for one of their, decent players in the playoffs sometime, or the guy ends up playing really banged up and isn't that effective. Toronto's another one where, they got a really good team. They got a really good opportunity to win 2 rounds easy. And then who knows, right now they would finish number 1 if we're basing it on regular season standings. So, they would be right there to potentially face the easier of the remaining 3 teams.
Right. How easy is that first round matchup going to be with the Habs? It ain't going to be that easy.
No, I think it's funny.
Are you starting to believe what I was saying about the Habs being such a tough out in the first round?
No, because I still question their scoring ability. I know they've got depth, but it's rare.
What happens if they go and get another forward?
It's got to get it.
If they got Mike Hoffman?
Well, there's a team that could use him because he's a pure shooter.
I think he's a good fit. And I know, and I don't think I know with 100% certainty that they talked to Mike Hoffman in the offseason and were very interested and decided to go with Toffoli. Now that Gallagher's out and they've got him on LTIR, it's provided breathing room for them to actually make a move. And by the way, Bergevin and Doug Armstrong have been trade partners previously and recently. They could make something happen. Jake Allen, they took Edmonton, of course. I think that's a possibility. If I'm looking at teams that are interested in Mike Hoffman, I think Montreal, I think Boston. I don't think he's a fit in Toronto for, the reasons I mentioned. And just going back quickly to the Leafs, it has to be about fit. It's not necessarily just about, can we add a top 6? What they're looking for is a 6-7 player. Because then you start to go through the permutations. Let's think about a guy like Hoffman. Okay. If you were to add him to the mix, you got to put him in the spot that Matthews is in on the power play now. Then you need to move Matthews to the bumper spot. Then you're taking the guy who's in the bumper spot and sitting him on the bench. And then also taking a player out of your lineup. Is it Joe Thornton? Who is it? Not everyone's going to be happy there. And that's, I think, how teams overthink the deadline. They're let me add this player, but they don't necessarily consider the ripple effect that comes with it. And I think that's sometimes why trade deadline moves, especially for really good teams that are humming along, you inject this new piece into your mix and it doesn't work out.
Yeah, that's exactly what Don said on the pod, that he said, if you're going to move a big time offensive guy, you're better off to do it earlier than wait later, because you got more time to adapt. Now, I want to talk about the city that you're residing in right now, the Philadelphia Flyers, who I think for a lot of people in the organization around the league, they've been somewhat of a disappointment. A lot of people thought the way they played last year in the second half of the season that they would be going on the way up. So here they are. I think they should be a seller, but they don't have a ton to sell off other than Lawton. So what do you think they do? I know they waived Gostisbehere. They didn't get any feelers. He's got, term left, which is the big thing. Is Lawton the only guy, or do you see anyone else they could move?
I think Lawton's the only guy that makes sense. I think there's still some roster reconstructive surgery to perform, but I think it's got to wait until the offseason. I was talking to a couple different people today about, again, the idea of Jack Eichel And are the Buffalo Sabres listening? 100% they're listening, and they're getting calls on Jack Eichel before the trade deadline.
Nah.
I just don't understand the incentive to move him. And this same theory applies to the Flyers in this case. Why would you make this decision now and play with an incomplete deck, play with a short deck? Because there's so many teams that would like to be in that can't be in right now, cap reasons and otherwise. They can at least shuffle their deck in the summer and get involved. And I just, as much as you might want to, and it might be tempting, I don't get any incentive to do so. And I think the same with the Flyers. If you want to make a bigger, different move, if you want to move a Konechny, or if you want to move, someone else that would have value, why would you do it now?
Oh, I agree. Now it's tough, and unless the team is going to increase the payment because they're getting an extra playoff out of that player, right? That's the only, they would have to, they gotta add a little
pay a real premium.
Pay 100%. And, the Jack Eichel one to me is very interesting. I get, especially nowadays, because if somebody doesn't win or have success early, it's like, oh my God, their career's over. And I'm like, well, we might want to go back and look at Sakic and Lemieux and when they only had 21 teams in the league, and you could almost fall into the playoffs, and they still didn't make the playoffs. So you're in a soon to be 32 team league. Half the teams aren't making the postseason. Like, there's going to be some young players that don't have instant success. That's just the reality of it, because most of the top picks are going to crap teams, Frank. And now I think it's just going to get harder. It's going to take time for those teams, especially with the changing of the lottery. And now it's down to only 2 picks, and the amount you move up. I think some teams and organizations and even players might have to readjust to say, you know what, I might, just because I'm a number 1 overall pick doesn't mean that I'm going to go to a bad organization and within 2 or 3 years, we're going to be good.
Yeah. And I think it's not so much the shitstorm that Jack Eichel has already waded through. It's now what's still ahead, because they're obviously destined towards teardown again. Then it's how quickly are we looking at 5 years before you're like, look at what the Detroit Red Wings are mired in. Like, it's going to be a long time before that team is really competitive. I think, that's a tough thing to stare. Like, are we looking at year 11 for Jack Eichel in the NHL before he's like, his team's competitive again? Like, I don't know how you stare that down.
Yeah. They've got they've got 2 really good defensemen. Like, I really like Dahlin, and you look at how much better he's played just since they made the coaching change. Well, because they finally have a semblance of a system. Like, it's really kind of embarrassing when you watch Buffalo play now compared to how they played even 3 weeks ago, where they're, when players are saying, I don't even know we had a system. I've never talked to an NHL player who's ever said that to me before.
Are you saying that you don't think Ralph Kruger is going to get an NHL job again?
Yeah. Hey, Ralph's a super nice guy, but that doesn't mean he's a good NHL head coach.
I don't think he's shown any ability to be an NHL head coach.
No.
And I'm just like, I've enjoyed my conversations with Ralph. I think he's a really intelligent guy, but like, I have yet to see any proof on the ice in multiple NHL seasons now why he should get another crack. So if he even wanted one, by the way.
Speaking of the Sabres, Taylor Hall's sitting out missing games for safety reasons. They've got Miller. They got a few others. Are you expecting a massive sale out of Buffalo in the next 3 days?
I think they're going to try. Why not? I mean, look, I think the one guy I was really curious about today, and I'd been making some calls, was Linus Ullmark. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs continue to poke around on the goaltending front. We've talked about this for the last few podcasts. And I think the thought process has been, to this point, Freddie Anderson's going to be fine. He'll get back, get healthy. Maybe he came back too early last time. And then Jack Campbell has played so well that 1-2 punch. And if you need Hutchinson as insurance, great. But I think the problem is with the Leafs, we haven't had any proof that Freddie Anderson's fine. We may think he's trending there, but we haven't seen it. And until that happens, and it probably won't happen, obviously, until after the deadline, then you can't do something that I do think that they've been exploring those options. And I do think Ullmark was a guy weeks ago previously that they had checked in on. And I believe the Buffalo Sabres are intent on signing Ullmark and keeping him in the fold. But here's my issue, and you talked about teardown, is if you are Kevin Adams, as much as you like Linus Ullmark and as well as he's played, He has points in 11 of his 16 games that he started, which is a freaking incredible number for by far the last place team in the league. Why are you not selling Linus Ullmark and getting assets and then saying, hey, Linus, on July 29th or whatever the date is, I should know the date, you can come back here. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you 5 times 5. Make up a number, whatever it is. And if it's a second round pick, like it's going to be something decent because he might be the best goalie available if he is available, and he's a pending UFA.
Yeah, I understand the theory of guys coming, hey, if we're going to trade this guy, we can re-sign him. How often does that happen? All of a sudden, let's say if you're Linus Ullmark.
Who cares? Like if you're afraid, if you're scared, get a dog.
But if you
need assets, your team's not going to be competitive next year. You need second round picks.
Don't you need a starting goaltender more?
Every team needs a good starting goalie, but there's going to be a ton available. Again, there's going to be a reshuffling with the expansion draft and the number of guys that are available. Yeah. You can pluck a guy from a team and trade for him rather than they lose him for nothing from Seattle. This is going to be another year to get a goalie. Go out and trade for someone. If you're afraid that you're going to lose him, and Don Waddell, another, I have re-listened to that podcast twice. I love what he says about so many teams are worried about what you're going to lose instead of what you're gaining. And for a team that isn't going to be competitive again, if by chance it doesn't work out and he falls in love with the new city he goes to and goes on a run and re-signs there, go and get someone new. But at least you've got a second round pick in your back pocket or whatever the asset might end up being, that it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes even more sense for Joe Sakic and the Colorado Avalanche.
Riddick, Bernier, Ullmark, like there's plenty of guys that are of quality that you can get this.
Ullmark's the best. If I'm taking my choice, he's the best of those 3.
I agree. Yeah, and but he's not on our trade bait board because we have no sense that he is available because the Sabres are intent on re-signing him.
Okay. Let's get to producer Ty now for buy or sell.
Yes, buy or sell, as always, guys, brought to you by Jock Market. Hell of an episode so far. I tweeted this out last week. It's like drinking out of a fire hose on these Friday episodes, the amount of info you guys are hitting us with. But jockmarket.com is where you want to go. The promo code is DFO20, whether it's NHL hockey, whether it's Major League Baseball, or whether it's the Masters, which is going on this weekend. Jock Market has you covered. Trade shares of players in real time with other users. Get rewarded. Show off your smarts a little bit. Number 1 on buy or sell. Kyle Palmieri goes to the Islanders, just like you all kind of predicted in buy or sell with Gregor and LeBrun earlier in the week. I think this makes the Islanders legit. I think they will come out of that division and make the conference finals. Frank, are you buying or selling?
Selling. I've got the Washington Capitals. I picked them to win the Stanley Cup before the season started, and I'm sticking with them.
Ooh. You know what? The Islanders are... They're kind of like the Rodney Dangerfield of the NHL. I don't think they get much respect, but man, they're so competitive. They're hard to play against. And I think they can win 2 rounds. So I will buy on the New York Islanders because I just think they can choke the life out of teams come playoff time.
And they got there I'm taking nothing away from them. They're a good team that got there last year. That's even better now and has maybe the best coach in the NHL. I like the Islanders a lot. And I for sure saw them being competitive, but I have to stick to my guns. I think the Caps are darn good, and I'm curious to see what they might add on the goalie front, if anything, before the deadline.
Hey, their 2 young goalies are playing great. And you know what? Like Ovechkin's probably my favorite player to watch for the last however many years he's been in the league. I love goal scorers. And I love that Ovi was like a power forward who didn't fight, but he'd run guys over early in his career. It's phenomenal. So, hey, if the Caps go like a Caps Islanders, if that's the East final, sign me up.
The Tampa Bay Lightning. You talked about the other 2 teams at the top of that division and how they might be active at the deadline. I'm going to say the Lightning will make a surprise addition before Monday's deadline. Gregor, you buying or selling?
Gosh, I've looked at their cap space, and I know Frank threw this out a few weeks ago. And now I've been figuring it out, trying to play capologist, and can they fit someone in? And those teams, it doesn't surprise me, but I'm going to say I'm selling because I think they do. Well, do we include Kucherov? Because if I can include Kucherov,
no, that's fake. You cannot include that.
No,
get out of here.
Then I'm selling. I find it hard to do.
They are buying. I'm buying. They're buying. They are adding a defenseman before Monday at 3 p.m. Don't know how big, how splashy, but they're they're in on David Savard. They might get David Savard. So
All right.
they're going to try everything they can.
Frank bringing the heat. Number 3, coming up north here to Edmonton. You touched on, Gregor, you hinted Hoffman, Oilers, maybe. I'm going to say the prices will drop and Ken Holland will acquire a scoring left winger before the deadline. Frank, you buying or selling?
Selling. I think they're going to keep an eye on prices. Ken Holland's been around the game forever. He talks to everyone. He's well respected. They're going to try, but I don't think the prices are going to fall that far to the point where the Oilers are comfortable.
I think he is going to add a forward. Is it going to be someone we consider like a legit second line left winger? That's hard. But here's the thing. They don't need to add a legit second line winner. They just need to add a left winger, Frank. And right now, I think that second line left wing spot is like it's the Grand Canyon of opportunities for anybody who's got some skill. If they add a winger, what they need is a winger with size, because right now it's basically you got Papa Smurf and you got Brainy Smurf and you got every Smurf
easy
who's on the wing. No, it's true. They're too small. You got Cahoon, you got Yamamoto, you got Ennis. You cannot go in the playoffs.
That is offensive.
With small guys. What's wrong with the Smurfs?
They're blue. Like what? Like why?
Well, that's not the point. They're small. I just watched the movie The Smurfs with my son. Nothing offensive about the Smurfs.
Frank's takeaway is that the Oilers have too many blue forwards.
Yeah.
Like
it's not the Blue Man Group we're talking about. I think most people
tiny.
when they see Smurfs, they think of small, not blue.
I know where you were heading. I was just I had to point out that they were blue. Who is it? Who's the guy? Like who's your guy?
The thing. Like there's no.
Tell me who it is, and then we'll talk about acquisition.
Ryan Zingle.
I'll tell you this. No, I don't think anyone is calling on Ryan Zingle.
Why can't Ken Holland?
I like to this point, I think it's been extremely quiet on Ryan Dzingel. Does he fit the bill for you?
No.
No?
Not at all.
So he doesn't move your needle.
No, not he's very similar to what they have a lot of. And what they need is
tell me who the guy is.
Well, I was looking, there's not really, you know who actually would help their team a lot, and I like him, and I think Frank, the Dallas Stars. I know you mean holding on to the Stars, and they're still 7 back with 3 games in hand now on Nashville. But I look at Dallas. They've got Alexiak. Cogliano is fast, but he's not big enough. Really, there's not teams like Detroit. I looked at their lineup. They don't have anyone. There's very few guys like it. The one guy,
Blake Como.
Blake Como's he was the best.
He's 6'1".
The other guy who might make sense, because you could then move someone else outside because that would help them, but he's way too expensive. And now because of COVID, I'm not even sure they're going to trade anybody. But Brandon Sutter, I thought, might have actually been an okay acquisition. I know he's a center, but
I mentioned him on Insider Trading connected to the Oilers.
There's lots of centers who can play wing in the playoffs. But he doesn't make sense. He's his cap hits way too high.
Yeah.
They need a $2 million. They can absorb a guy with $2 million cap hit, because they would give it an asset. And just like they made the trade with Mike Green last year, where they included Sam Gagner to make the numbers work, they would send back one of their forwards with $1 million cap hit to figure.
What do you think about Scott Lawton? He doesn't have size, but he plays with bite.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I guess
he's found a little bit of a scoring touch. Like he actually has put his game together, and I've obviously had a front row seat to watch him up close. That's a guy that learned how to play in the NHL. Really talented junior player, first round pick, came into the NHL at 18, and then had to figure out the game from a whole different perspective, from a role that he never played before, and he's played it almost as well as anyone in the league.
I'll ask you this, Frank, because it's a great description. I've had numerous coaches explain to players. They call them quiet players, where, in the playoffs, if you have too many quiet players, it's tough. Is Scott Lawton, I don't watch the Flyers enough. Is he a quiet player in his style as far as, being assertive, aggressive? Does he have that?
He's aggressive. No, he's definitely aggressive.
Then size doesn't matter because there's lots of small guys that are aggressive, right? But the Oilers have a lot of smaller players who I would say have more quiet games. They're skilled, but they just have, it's like anything. If you had all bunch of big guys who couldn't skate, that's not good. If you have all a bunch of small skill guys, too much of anything doesn't work in the NHL playoffs.
He's on track for 40 points over an 82 game season. Like, not a producer and scorer, more of a grinder though. And I don't think that's what the Oilers need. Is it?
Right now, honestly, in their
obviously they have the scoring help, but does he fit stylistically?
You look at, I think the best example is a guy who's now won 2 Stanley Cups. Patrick Maroon is a big body who's kind of a grinder. When you put him with skilled players, he did it in Anaheim for short stints.
He was like a couple years too early in Edmonton.
Yeah. But you got him for nothing, right? Like Scott Laughton, you probably got to pay a little bit too much.
That's the problem is Scott Laughton's going to be really expensive.
Yeah.
I like that we just workshopped a whole little trade scenario.
What a meandering, like.
We went down a rabbit hole.
Yes.
All right. Next up.
Are you buying or selling, Frank?
I'm selling. I think the Oilers they're going for whatever they can get for that 4th round pick, whatever prices drop to. That's what I think. I mean, Ken Holland surprised the heck out of us last year, but I think it ended up burning him.
Interesting. We've talked about Mike Hoffman a few times now. Also hearing Tyler Bozak, who's been on the TSN trade bait board, I believe. Frank, I'm going to say both of them are gone out of St. Louis by the deadline. Frank, you buying or selling?
Selling, I think one of them will be. And I think some teams are curious about Jaden Schwartz, another UFA. I think some teams have asked. The sense that I've gotten in calling around is that the St. Louis Blues haven't brought Jaden Schwartz up yet. Not saying it's a no. Obviously, it's possible, but I think the price would be higher for Schwartz. But I would be surprised at this point if Hoffman doesn't go. And I also wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that the Blues sell and buy. I think they've been kicking tires on a couple guys, and I wonder if they're in on Taylor Hall. That could, unload Hoffman, bring in Hall. Obviously you'd have to make the money work and whatever else, but I think that's a possibility. And I know that at least one team in the East has been talking to them about Vince Dunn.
Interesting.
You know what, Frank, it's funny because I had a lengthy conversation with someone in St. Louis today who's really connected to that team. And he basically described exactly what you said. He feels that the Blues, you got to remember, they're not far removed from being a Stanley Cup champion. Like, they've got a lot of pedigree. Now, I know they've really revamped their blue line, obviously with no Edmondson and no Pietrangelo and Jay Bouwmeester retired. So it looks very different, but they're still very confident with a lot of their core guys there. And so they just feel that they got to move around some pieces on the chessboard. So
this isn't a teardown. This is just we're trying to reload as quickly as we can.
Yeah, they feel that they have, Jaden Schwartz to me is a fascinating player, because he's been a pretty consistent guy. He's got 2 goals this year, 2 goals. So
he's really struggled. He's I don't know how well you know him. I have so much time and respect for Jaden Schwartz, and his dad passed away really suddenly before the season started. And I can't imagine that hasn't affected him. I don't know if I've talked about it on this podcast, but I've talked about it on others. I wrote a story with his dad in the Stanley Cup final. Actually, he met me in the lobby of my hotel, amazing guy. He walked over, and I wanted to write a story about Jaden Schwartz's sister who died of cancer. And it was an emotional, heartbreaking interview, salt of the earth, Saskatchewan guy. And it was one of my favorite stories that I've written in my career at TSN. And then he ends up passing away really suddenly before this season started. And I stuff like that has to just hurt.
Oh, hey, I can, as a young man who lost his father, I can tell you for sure, especially when it comes out of the blue, it can be gut wrenching, and everybody reacts to it differently. So I could easily, even though you try not to think about it, it just, it's not like he's thinking about it when he's standing at a face off or anything.
No, but it just affects every part of your life.
100% it does. And your confidence changes, especially because him and his dad were close. So if that's the guy that you're just used to talking to after your games, dads say things that some dads are just great at just always, hey son, you're doing great. Don't worry about it. Keep your spirits up. And some dads know their kid maybe needs a kick in the rear end at times. And so when suddenly that's gone, that's an element that's hard to really describe, where that void is, where you just look at your phone and you're thinking that you're waiting for the text or the call and it never comes, and you're so used to it. So
Rick Schwartz, one of the ultimate hockey dads, just wanted to give him a shout out. Thinking of the Schwartz family, and I have been all year.
I'm actually going to buy, Tyler, because I think the Blues, it's going to take a lot of finagling, but I sense that organization feels like their window's still wide open, and they want to readjust with some of the good pieces they have.
The last one, Frank, you had your calculator out to do some Scott Lawton math. I don't know if you'll need it for this one, but yesterday we saw the rare 5-player trade go down between Florida and Chicago. I will say that is the most players we see in a trade before the deadline. 5 is the cap. Jason, you buying or selling?
Like in one transaction?
In one transaction. We saw 5 today. Will we see 5 again? I'm saying we won't, so there's the buyer.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of prospects in there. One trade. Yeah, the only one is Frank talked about Florida and Columbus, and might have going for both the Columbus guys. And if you do that, then you're going to have to give a lot back,
especially when you don't want to give up picks.
Yeah. So, but I got to sell. Like 5's just a lot because it's rare to have that many NHL players going. So how many prospects can you give up? So no, I'll sell.
Frank.
I'm going to sell, but I'm just trying to think of the players on our board that could generate a lot. Taylor Hall might be able to. I'm going to sell. I think it's hard to do.
Fair enough. Last one. It's a bonus one. Frank, who you got winning the Masters?
Ooh, I want Tony Finau to win. I am such a big Tony Finau fan.
He's a lovable guy.
He is, and still grossed out by that ankle turn that he had at the Masters on a Wednesday a couple years ago. And I just want him to get a win. Like his story and what he's been through and what he's accomplished. He's an amazing guy, and I'd like to see that.
Jason?
Well, the easy pick, of course, is Rose, because I don't know anybody who follows golf. Did you see him from hole 8 to 17?
Lights out.
That guy was 9 under. It was just ridiculous. He looked like in his zone. You saw his post round interview, like just relaxed. And I know that it's hard to go wide. That's cheap.
Come on, that's a cheap pick. You can't pick the runaway round 1 leader.
Well, how often does the guy go start to finish?
But he's got what is it, a 5-shot lead?
4 or 5 now. Yeah.
Okay.
4-stroke lead. But
okay.
Okay. Well,
dig a little deeper. Come on.
Then we'll see I'll go John Ram. Sorry.
I don't mind that. I don't mind little Rombo. I'm going Justin Thomas. He's my boy. He needs a hell of a comeback in the final 3 days. I probably doubt he can do it, but I'm going to be supporting him.
What about your favorite guy, Patrick Reed?
He's nobody's favorite guy.
Yeah,
and I was going to say, Jock MKT, though, I bet you with a guy like JT.
Rose? JT,
his stock would be low. If you wanted to buy low, you could potentially have a little value there.
Jason, I have buddies who bet on Patrick Reed because they hate watching him win so much that they're like, I'm going to bet on him, so in case he does, I'm not miserable watching the entire tournament.
Think about an athlete right now in sports. Is there an athlete because it's rare to have a pretty close to majority of fans agreeing on a topic, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't get fans to agree who's the best player in the league. Everybody will debate on it, right? You look at Patrick Reed, it's like almost unanimous. I can't recall a player who's been that vilified and despised by lots of golf fans, whether you're a diehard golf fan or you're just
Matt Kuchar was in there for a while too.
Like it's fun. And you know what? I think villains are great for sports.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I hope Patrick Reed is in the running on Sunday, because what happens then is people are you know how it is. You watch the guy lose.
Gregor, you love being the heel.
Oh, dude. You know what's funny? Like I liked a few of the heels in wrestling all the time. It was fantastic.
Of course you did.
Yeah. Like I actually liked Hulk Hogan better when he became the heel.
Well, there you go.
What's wrong with you?
There's buy or sell for Jock Market. Remember that promo code is DFO20. It gets you a $20 deposit bonus.
Are you?
By the way, fan? Tyler said, I'm not a wrestling fan, but Tyler said drinking from a fire hose. That is going to be me with Tito's on Monday night after we wrap our podcast following the deadline. Might even be me during the pod.
Remind everyone that our podcast Monday will be coming. We're not going to do it in the morning because a lot of the trade's going on. So we'll be having it right after our show. So we'll be coming out early Monday evening to recap and not only talk about the trades, Frank, but there's always a few that came close that didn't come to fruition. And sometimes, it's always interesting to hear, we thought this guy was going to go and then he didn't go. So I'll leave you with this. Is there one player on your board who you're confident, you're like, this guy's getting moved, But come Monday night, we'll be like, damn, he didn't get traded.
One guy. Damn, he didn't get traded. I would say that would be Nick Foligno. He's pretty high on our board, number 4. He's been there for a long time. I think if the right deal comes along, that the Blue Jackets are going to move him, but I think that they're asking so much because of all the intangibles that they bring as their sort of spiritual leader, the guy that's gone to war with that group with Torts and, you know, all the other things that he provides that makes the asking price high, and teams maybe aren't willing to pay that. I thought the Islanders, if Palmieri, they didn't get Palmieri, that would have been their guy. And now I don't know who's going to pay the premium to get him.
Fair. I think Montour's the guy who's not going to get traded.
Okay. Anyone in Buffalo, I could see the stink just wafting to the point where teams are like, I don't know what this guy's worth, and I'm not willing to give up a lot to get him.
Yeah. Well, Frank, we look forward to it. We'll be discussing it after the trade deadline on Monday. Have yourself a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the Masters, and we'll talk to you on Monday.
Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Seravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode.